Alright, so I would suggest watching part one of this video. A while back, I made a pretty okay theory about Mike being the Forgotten Man. You know, this character that we never get to see, but is fairly important. This Mike character, I made a theory that Mike is the Forgotten Man, the man behind the tree, the one you go get the eggs from when you go from room to room. I theorized that he went into hiding to get away from the device friends. He used to be friends with Spampton because, Spampton sort of moved away from everyone from TV World and said, we don't need anyone. We don't need CRTs. We don't need Mike. But it seems like he also misses Mike. Mike was the last person that he left on good terms with. It's just he wasn't able to see Mike again after he left, right? So it was Spampton wants everyone from TV World to burn except for Mike. Mike was someone he still held good feelings for. Now, I have thought about this a little bit. I feel like this debunks any theory that Mike is device friend or ERAM. I feel like this debunks the theory that Mike could be any of those because Spampton's trying to hide from the friends. If Spampton wanted anyone to burn, it would be the cats. And probably he'd also want ERAM to burn because ERAM is the leader of the cats. These are the things he's trying to hide from. He would not be on good terms with them. But he is still on good terms with Mike. He still likes Mike. So I got to thinking about how Mike. Tennis said that Mike started acting differently after the other guy left, which implies around the same time Spampton left, that was the same time the real Mike left. The real Mike left around the same time of Spampton for presumably a very similar reason. Now, this could just mean that Mike was an alternate personality of Spampton. I could see that. But I like to think that Mike is just a friend of Spampton, who left very shortly after Spampton left. So they both went their separate ways from the tennis studio. Spampton is the one who changed his appearance, and the Forgotten Man, Mike, was the one who went into hiding. Now, I realized one connection between what we know about Mike and what we know about the Forgotten Man that was very, very interesting to me, and that was the concept of therapy. So Mike says the motor mouth Mike, the fake Mike, he says he does a lot for Tenna, and one of the big things that seems to be repeated over and over again that he does do for Tenna is therapy sessions. Even in the midst of the chapter 3 storyline, Tenna was like, "Hey, Mike, cancel my 3 o'clock therapy session because it looks like it's happening right now." Something like that. So Mike used to do therapy sessions for Tenna. The Forgotten Man seems to be framed as a therapist for Chris. Like the therapist who offers drawing classes to sort of relieve trauma. The Forgotten Man who hands Chris eggs. Maybe eggs are a sign of. Maybe the eggs are an inside joke between the therapist and Chris. I don't know. I thought about that, and I was like, that's interesting. One thing I did notice, however, is that it does seem like the Forgotten Man is in the light world because there are interactions in the light world if you find the eggs. If you find the eggs and you go up to random places, you can see a man waving at you happily or tapping happily on like on like his food when he like gets it at the diner, you know? And these are interactions you can only get if you have the egg. And so, thinking about that original theory, let's take it one step further. What if the Forgotten Man is not a Lightener, but the Forgotten Man is a Darkener based off of a real world Lightener? Okay, so let's keep going with this idea. The real life Lightener, let's call him Michael. So we can have a difference between Mike and Michael. There is the weapon called the Michael Bomb. And that's interesting because it doesn't seem like Mike's name is ever elongated to Michael at any other point in the series. Could be like a Gaster Blaster situation. Like this is named after who is technically a different character, but is still related to Mike. So Michael is the real person. Michael is a therapist who helped Chris back in their young days when they were going through a lot of trauma. Now, one of the things Michael probably did was offer Chris some like real life drawing sessions, like some art therapy sort of stuff, like painting or drawing or something. Painting on an easel. And that is very interesting because if you read Spampton's boss dialogue, what he says is, we don't need easels or CRTs. And we've seen a CRT character, but we have not yet seen an easel character. And we know that Spampton had a relationship with both Mike and Tenna. These were two people he used to know very well, but who he had to move away from for some reason. Tenna was the one he grew to hate and view as a criminal and a liar. Mike was the one he still liked. But he still had to go away from Mike because he had to go away from home. So what if Mike's object in the light world is an easel? And the reason he's named Mike is because he's named after the real life therapist. Maybe it's a drawing of the real life therapist. Maybe Chris drew their therapist just because, well, they were an important comfort figure in their life. Now, Chris may have forgotten these therapy sessions. They could have been done when Chris was like 2. They could have been done back when Chris was a toddler and didn't even have like coherent memory recognition anymore. I think if they were like teenager therapy sessions, I think Chris would still remember them. But if they were from when Chris was really, really young, then Chris probably doesn't remember this person at all. But Chris also would have kept that little drawing they made in therapy class somewhere in their house. Somewhere they don't remember. And so the therapist was forgotten, and the easel was forgotten that the therapist was drawn on. But every time you enter these dark worlds and you find the easel, you find Mike, the Forgotten Man, Chris subconsciously keeps a tiny piece of that image in their mind. And then, when Chris sees that person in the light world, even if they don't fully recognize them, they will subconsciously take note of what that person is doing in the light world. I kind of believe this theory now. Now, I know that something could come out to like disprove this, and even then, it doesn't give us that much information on Mike or the Forgotten Man. It just kind of connects them as being either the same character or very similar characters. I like this idea, and I think this is actually where the story is going to go in chapter 6, 7. I could be wrong, but I kind of want this to be the case.